I paid over $1,500 for this iPhone 17 Pro Max.
That same week, some analysts took the whole thing apart and priced out every component. The screen, chip, camera, battery, frame. That's called the bill of materials, just the raw parts, before anyone assembles, packages, or ships it. The total for the phone, $408. So that's a gap of over $1,000.
Now, obviously, it's not pure profit though.
That $408 doesn't include assembly labor, and out of the gap, Apple still has to cover shipping, retail, marketing, R&D, and everyone at Apple headquarters who isn't like literally building phones. But even when you account for all of that, Apple literally still keeps about 27 cents of every dollar as pure profit.
That's company-wide, everything they sell.
Car companies celebrate 5%. Most retailers would kill for 10 cents per dollar. Apple ships hardware in a box and still outmargins almost every software company on Earth. And this is even crazier. When I tap my card to buy this phone every year, it's not the only time Apple profits off me. Every month, Apple gets $30 for my iCloud.
That one's obvious. I know I'm paying Apple.
But here's the one you probably never think about. I pay $12.99 a month for Duolingo. In my head, that money goes to Duolingo. Only Duolingo. Except that's not true. Because I subscribe through the App Store on my phone, Apple takes a cut of that too. Often 30%, sometimes 15%. So every time you're subscribing on an app through Apple, Apple's making money.
I never see that line item.
It's not on my Duolingo receipt. It just quietly comes out before Duolingo ever sees the money. So think about all these apps: Spotify, fitness apps, news apps, games, dating. Now multiply me by a few 100 million people who all do roughly what I just did, and you get the single most reliable revenue machine in the history of consumer products.
So someone actually built this machine.
I love Apple.
And his name is Tim Cook.
When he took over as CEO in 2011,
I am very excited about this new role.
Apple stock was worth about $13 a share, split adjusted.
This is my first product launch since being named CEO.
For the first time in history, a company is worth $1 trillion.
$2 trillion. Can you believe that? Shares of the company increased nearly 60% this year.
Apple on Monday became the first company in the world to hit $3 trillion.
It is nearing $4 trillion in market cap.
Apple briefly hit $5 trillion market value yesterday.
Today, it's more than 20 times higher in 15 years. By the way, if you put like $10,000 into Apple stock at that time, today you would have $280,000. So Apple went from a $350 billion company to one that's crossed $4 trillion, even $5 trillion at one point. Now, Cook joined Apple back in 1998 as a regular employee. Remember, he did not found the company. He didn't own a piece of it going in. Everything he has now came from stock. The board paid him for doing the job well, year after year. And today, that's worth around $3 billion. So he engineered this whole money-making machine, and he did it in 3 specific ways. He got you buying a new phone every single year without blinking. He got you paying monthly for storage and subscriptions you never think twice about. And he built a supply chain so tight that almost every one of those transactions comes back to Apple as pure profit. But now he's stepping down and handing it over to someone else.
Apple just announced its biggest leadership change in 15 years.
A lot of the media is covering this as like a leadership change, but I don't think that's what's happening, and let me explain why. For 15 years, Cook's entire job was to make Apple invisible in your life, in a good way.
But now this guy is taking over.
Been at Apple since 2001, so 22 years now. I'm the Senior Vice President of Hardware Engineering.
John Ternus, and he comes from a completely different world inside Apple. His whole career has been about building new things people get excited about.
I started in product design.
And if that's the direction Apple's heading, then his job isn't to keep the machine quiet anymore.
His job might be to make you notice Apple again.
To get you excited about something new, the way people used to get excited about the actual iPhone.
To unlock the phone, I just take my finger and slide it across.
So here's what I want to get into. First, why the board handed a $4 trillion company to a guy who's never touched a budget in his life. Second, what Tim Cook actually built in 15 years that nobody talks about, and why it's the same reason Apple's now scrambling to catch up on AI. Third, what John Ternus is betting the whole company on, and whether it means your phone may actually finally change.
Let's get into it. The average person switches between apps at work more than 1,000 times a day. 1,000 times. Copying something here, pasting it there, hunting for a button you know exists somewhere, all of that switching is where your hours in a day actually disappear. I was having a chat the other day with a friend, and we noticed the people who seem to be more in control of their workday, it's the people who are using tools that help them optimize their productivity. Their apps are quietly talking to each other in the background, moving information along without anyone actually lifting a finger. That's what Zapier does, and they're today's sponsor. You connect the apps you already use, tell it what should happen when something changes, and it handles the busy work for you. You don't need to worry about any code or dev team because it's just workflows that run themselves while you focus on the more important part of your job. If you want to get hours back, check the link in the description. As a subscriber of this channel, you can sign up for free and you'll see what disappears from your to-do list. And now back to the video.
So Apple is handing a company with roughly $4 trillion to a man who has never run the money side of a business in his life.
Like, he's never been in charge of sales targets, budgets, profit and loss, any of it.
John Ternus. He's 51 years old. He joined Apple in 2001, fresh out of mechanical engineering school. He has spent his entire life inside the labs, building physical objects. Every year of it. iPads, AirPods, the Apple Watch. He is, by every traditional definition, an engineer's engineer.
And now he's becoming the CEO of the most valuable company on earth.
Now, if you had told a business school in 2011 that this is how Apple would hand off power in 15 years, they would have said, you have the story backwards, because in 2011, Apple actually did the opposite. Steve Jobs was the inventor, the visionary, the guy with the taste. And when he died, the board did not replace him with another inventor. They actually replaced him with Tim Cook. Tim Cook was the supply chain guy, the operations guy, the man who never once stood on stage and unveiled a product that he personally dreamed up. That was the bet this company basically took in 2011. They said, okay, we already have the invention, now we need someone who can run it without breaking it. And now 15 years later, Apple just made the exact opposite bet.
And I think that swap tells you more about where Apple thinks that next decade is heading.
Let's be clear here. Tim Cook did not invent a single hit Apple product in 15 years as CEO. Not one. The Apple Watch, the AirPods, they launched under him, but they were conceived under the Jobs era DNA. And since then,
nothing that reshaped an industry the way this iPhone did.
But what Tim Cook built was invisible, and maybe, to be fair, even harder. He took a company that made beautiful objects and turned it into a company that makes beautiful margins. He restructured Apple's entire supply chain into the most efficient hardware logistics operation on the planet. Parts get sourced in one country, assembled in another, shipped to sell in a third, all timed down to the day, so Apple almost never sits on excess inventory. Okay, so then quietly, Tim Cook does something even bigger. He shifts Apple's entire profit engine away from, did we sell enough iPhones this quarter, to something new, something even more lucrative: services. iCloud, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, the App Store cut, the $30 a month storage plan I pay, but I never think twice about. That line item, multiplied by hundreds of millions of people, is now one of the highest margin businesses in the world.
Oh, and by the way, Apple takes around 30% on most app purchases. 30%.
Well, Google's Android dropped its rate to as low as 10%.
Okay, but here's the tension in all of this.
That same machine that made Tim Cook's Apple so profitable might be the exact same reason that Apple is now behind on the biggest tech shift since the iPhone itself. So Apple Intelligence, that's the company's answer to this whole AI moment.
But it's been messy. Siri has always been a bit slow.
But Apple showed off a smarter Siri back in 2024, promised it within a year, but it slipped, and then it slipped again. Finally, after a couple years delay, it shipped. Now remember, Google had already rolled out Gemini Intelligence months earlier on the Pixel and the Galaxy S26. OpenAI had ChatGPT running as a mobile agent and had already been powering the parts that Apple's own AI couldn't handle. So when Apple finally shipped this, it wasn't even running on Apple's own AI, it was running on Google's Gemini under the hood. By the way, this is a company that usually never partners. They build everything in-house, and it went to a competitor just to catch up. Because Tim Cook's whole genius was optimization, not invention.
So is Tim Cook like a genius or kind of a bad CEO?
Well, his operational discipline really made Apple the most profitable company that has ever existed. And that same discipline may be precisely why Apple is now playing defense in one of the biggest tech shifts we've seen in our lifetime.
So basically both of these things can be true at the same time.
Okay, so what does Apple think it's buying with this engineer? I mean, let's look at what Ternus has actually shipped. Well, he was the lead voice behind Apple's Silicon transition. That's the multi-year project that moved the entire entire Mac lineup off Intel chips and into Apple's own M series processors. See, most companies would never have attempted a bet like that. The short-term risk was huge, but it worked. And he's also been the public face of Vision Pro, Apple's most speculative hardware bet in like a decade.
Many say it flopped, and I think it did.
But I will also say that it's a long-term wager on what computing looks like once and if ever phones stop being the main way we interact with screens. Ternus's whole resume is about building the next machine before anyone else knows they need it. So basically, Apple is quietly admitting that this whole optimization era has hit its ceiling, and the next decade has to be won on invention once again. Remember, that's the thing that the company really hasn't done in ages. Which brings me back to the question that I opened with. I still buy an iPhone every year. I pay the $30 a month for iCloud. I still don't think about Samsung. But let's say the next great Apple product actually gets built under Ternus. The thing that defines, let's say, the 2030s the way iPhone defined the 2010s. Well, history is going to remember that as his breakthrough, not Cook's 15 years of discipline. The discipline that kept the company solvent, profitable, and stable enough to make that breakthrough possible in the first place.
Let's be real for a second.
We celebrate invention, but we don't talk or care that much about operations. And I think it's about to play out again at the most valuable company on earth.
But here's the actual question, and I want you to answer in the comments below.
Does Apple need an inventor right now, or does it need someone who can just keep hundreds of millions of people like me quietly paying every month without even thinking about it?
Because those are just not the same job. But Apple kind of just bet the next decade on the assumption that they are.